Here's a special edition of the Weather Extreme video for this Sunday, August the 29th, 2021. I'm meteorologist Bill Murray. 16 years ago today, we were tracking the landfall of Hurricane Katrina, first in southeast Louisiana, then on the Mississippi coast to devastating effects. And we have an even more powerful hurricane than Katrina was at landfall this morning, heading inland on final approach into southeast Louisiana. Here is the infrared satellite imagery, very dramatic. Hurricane Ida, some 80 miles southeast of Houma, Louisiana. No, sorry, 80 miles southeast of Grand Isle, Louisiana, moving to the northwest at 15 miles an hour. Top winds now 145 miles an hour, making this an extremely dangerous Category 4 hurricane. It has intensified rapidly over the past 24 hours. In less than 24 hours, increasing 60 miles per hour in winds, the pressure dropping over 40 millibars. Pretty amazing. Clearly evident the eye here southeast of Grand Isle this morning, southeast of Houma, where it will be tracking later today in southwest of New Orleans. The National Hurricane Center track, basically unchanged, continues to take the storm inland there, lower Lafourche, lower Terrebonne parishes, passing west of the lakes and the city of New Orleans, moving to near Baton Rouge around midnight tonight, and making a turn through the Mississippi Delta near the northwest corner of Alabama on Tuesday afternoon, and eventually into the mid-Atlantic states. Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Hurricane warnings along the Gulf Coast, generally from Vermilion Bay through Grand Isle, the mouth of the Mississippi River, all of New Orleans and the lakes area, terminating there at the Mississippi-Louisiana border. We got a tropical storm warning along the Mississippi coast and the entire Alabama coast. This is the vortex data message from the NOAA plane. I don't think it found the center, 952 millibars. It kind of darted in from the southeast and then went out to the northeast. I think ostensibly to measure the wind field in that northeast quadrant of the storm. The eye was 15 nautical miles in diameter. Its character was closed. The inbound leg found winds of 125 miles an hour as measured by the SFMR surface wind estimation tool, but found winds of over 145 miles per hour on the outbound leg, which would have been through that northeast quadrant. So this is indicating this seriously intensified storm this morning. Now, I watched these advanced Dvorak technique messages out of the University of Wisconsin, and I'll refresh this one just to see because they updated frequently. They estimate the central pressure now at 931.7 millibars with maximum winds at 130 knots, which would be over 150 miles an hour. Folks, we may be getting close to having a Cat 5 hurricane. Earlier, we saw a lot of lightning around the center. That's beginning to come back. Can you imagine this thing getting even stronger? You can see thunderstorms in the outer bands. The global lightning mapper showing lightning strikes on those outer fringes of the hurricane, but we really get worried when we see them in the center. This is that NOAA flight into Hurricane Ida. And as it was entering the storm, it found central pressures getting down into the 940s. From its surface extrapolation. And look at these flight level winds, over 145 knots there. You multiply that by 90%, and still that's somewhere around 130 knots. You multiply that by 1.15, and so we easily have surface winds approaching 145 to 150 miles an hour, and that's right where they are. Now, if you're in southeastern Louisiana, you still have time to get out. Not much time. Traffic across interstate routes and highway routes in southeast Louisiana is good this morning. The Weather Channel's been focusing on this big traffic jam west of Lake Charles, but they're not going to have the effects of the storm. We're worried about all these areas. Now, kind of take you through kind of what we expect here. I'm going to use the National Digital Forecast Database from the Weather Service to sort of show the wind field. And, this is by 9 a.m. this morning, the eye of the hurricane approaching the coast. These are sustained winds already in coastal sections, 40 to 60 miles an hour in the New Orleans area, getting into tropical storm force gusts. And those winds will be increasing as we go through the day. You can see those winds beginning to come on shore, the extreme winds associated with the eye wall beginning to approach southern Lafourche Parish, the Grand Isle area. You can see winds there right along the coast averaging some 60 to 70 miles an hour. The New Orleans area averaging 40 to 45 miles an hour. But as we get toward 1 o'clock, the eye makes landfall there just west of Grand Isle in this depiction. The really intense winds are right around the center. They'll be measuring winds there in the Grand Isle area, well above 100 miles an hour with gusts to around 140 miles an hour. You can expect extreme tidal surge along this part of the coast, especially that slightly concave section there, and the winds very strong into the areas east of New Orleans, and the Wrigley's, and all these areas pushing into Lake Pontchartrain. Hopefully all those flood mitigation facilities that have been built will hold. Winds beginning to be sustained near tropical storm force here along the Mississippi coast. The Alabama coast, we're going to be okay. Winds 30 to 40 miles an hour, occasional higher gust as we go through time. Moving on up here now to 3 o'clock, the center is on land, experiencing strong tropical storm force winds in the New Orleans area, and of course devastating winds in the southern parishes of Louisiana, there southwest of New Orleans. This is moving toward 5 o'clock now. The center now passing just east of Houma, Louisiana. Sustained winds there around 60 miles an hour. Stronger winds on the eastern side, clearly above hurricane force, with strong tropical storm force winds up into the New Orleans area. As we go towards 7 o'clock, the system is beginning to pass west of New Orleans. It's past Thibodaux. It's heading toward Baton Rouge. Look at the very strong winds over the eastern sections there, over all of Lake Pontchartrain, New Orleans areas, in hurricane force winds at this time, with the most extreme winds just west of the city. Any deviation to the right could put New Orleans in much greater risk, but I think it's becoming very clear now that the center is going to take that track from just west of Grand Isle to west of New Orleans to near Baton Rouge during the overnight hours tonight. Here we can see the center about 9 o'clock beginning to approach Baton Rouge. The winds in New Orleans are beginning to slowly subside then. Areas along the North Shore, Covington, Mandeville, over to Hammond beginning to pick up stronger winds now. Hammond seeing a wind here at 11 o'clock around 51 miles an hour. Still the same winds around 50 to 55 miles an hour in the New Orleans area. And the eye zone past Baton Rouge there. Around 1 a.m., still tropical storm force winds over much of the area, with strong tropical storm and even some hurricane force winds still left in the weakening center and eye wall, which moves into southwestern Mississippi there around 3 a.m., continuing to have tropical storm force winds, and then we'll continue to have tropical storm force gusts for much of the day tomorrow across southeast Louisiana. That sort of tells you what's going on in that part of the country. Now, these are observations from the National Weather Service in New Orleans. At New Orleans International Airport at 5 a.m., light rain, winds gusting to 24 miles an hour. Their pressure down to 2983. No real crazy looking wind gusts across southeast Louisiana at this hour. Everybody generally reporting east or northeast winds, some 6 to 12 miles an hour, gusting to about 25 miles an hour. 21 mile per hour wind gust at Gulfport, 26 miles an hour out of the east at Biloxi, and Pascagoula gusting to 21. Waveland Yacht Club on the Mississippi coast gusting to 21 knots. Southwest Pass, 68 knot gusts there at 5 a.m. And actually a buoy there near the center of the storm is measured a gust to 96 miles an hour. No, sorry, 98 miles an hour. That's a buoy 42394, very near the center of the hurricane. So showing even south of Dauphin Island, winds gusting to 52 miles an hour. And these winds are going to continue to increase. These are the surge forecasts from the National Hurricane Center, and they've upped their forecast from Port Fourchon to the mouth of the Mississippi River. In that little concave area that I was showing you, those tides could reach 12 to 16 feet, which will be a devastating impact for any areas left there. Anybody who's stayed there will be in mortal danger. 8 to 12 foot surge back to Morgan City. This, of course, will get up into the unprotected areas, including Houma, where I fear that we could have a serious storm surge disaster with much of that city becoming underwater later today. A city that no stranger to hurricanes, but this may be the worst one since 1893 for that part of Louisiana. The Mississippi coast between Bay St. Louis and Ocean Springs, 6 to 9 feet, drops to 4 to 7 feet. Still a serious storm surge there to the Alabama-Mississippi border. Mobile Bay, 3 to 5 feet. They're already experiencing flooding in Mobile right now. Bayou La Batre, several roads impassable already as they're into moderate flooding. And the Mobile Bay Causeway experiencing flooding, as it always does. And then just a 1 to 3 foot surge all the way over to the Okaloosa County line. Taking a look at a couple of storm surge readings. Here's the late reading from Grand Isle now, showing that tide running about 1.5 feet above normal. That's not too bad yet. It's going to get much worse. The Waveland Yacht Club, you can see the tide rising there. The tide now beginning to fall, but the water level continuing to rise. They're now already at a 3.5 feet there in Waveland. And I was going to look at Dauphin Island, but I didn't get it pulled up properly here. Let's see if we can do that real quick. Right now on Dauphin Island, tide's running some 2.3 feet above normal. We're going into a period of low tide there on Dauphin Island, which helps a little bit for the water above dry ground. Now, rainfall, big threat too. So we talked about surge. Let's talk about rainfall. 15 to 20 inch rainfall amounts will not be impossible in areas from New Orleans down through Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes, Houma, places like that. A wide area of 10 to 15 inch rains cause serious flooding over the rest of southeastern Louisiana, coastal Mississippi. 6 to 10 inch amounts up to near Jackson and over to Mobile. And much of Mississippi, 4 to 6 inches. Some of that rain will get into western Alabama. Flash flood watches now for western central Alabama and for the western parts of the Tennessee Valley. Areas west of I-65 in Alabama and over the Tennessee Valley could see 2 to 4 inches of rain, with areas east of I-65 1 to 2 inches of rain. We'll see how that's going to transpire in a minute. But you can see a high risk of flash flooding for today over southeastern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, with a moderate risk all the way up through Mississippi to Memphis and over into western Alabama. We've got a slight risk over the next 3 days here in Alabama. Think of it just like you do a severe weather outlook. And I really worry about the area from Nashville up to south of Louisville and Kentucky, especially west of Nashville. They had devastating flooding a week ago. Now, severe weather. Tornadoes are always possible, especially in the right front flank of the storm as it makes landfall. So as the storm moves up here into southeastern Louisiana, begins to make the turn to the north and to the northeast. Those tornadoes will be possible today from the Mobile area across southern Mississippi through much of southeastern Louisiana. And I think I left out the Monday graphic here, unfortunately. Let's change that real quick. We can do that on the fly, which is what happens when you're using live slides here. The severe weather threat spreads into southwestern Alabama. Places like Evergreen, almost up to Demopolis, are going to be in the target zone tomorrow for tornadoes back into Mississippi, southern Louisiana. We could see a lesser chance over the rest of Mississippi and Alabama tomorrow, so we'll be watching that. And then as we get into Tuesday, the activity will shift to the east. You'll see sort of a squall line sort of develop. Now, this is the HRRR. We'll use it to sort of depict the radar, the future radar here. See the center of the hurricane moving on shore, southeastern Louisiana, moving into southern Mississippi. Early Monday morning, you can see this broad band of rain and thunderstorms, quite impressive, moving into southwestern Alabama. It will extend up to nearly to Montgomery, to Centerville, Brent, and to Lamar and Fayette counties by 11 a.m. tomorrow, reaching the Birmingham area around noon. We'll have several hours of moderate to heavy rain, and in those outer bands, we could see some severe weather I would expect it to be along these outer flanks probably, and in this area here, that's a particular area that we'll have to watch. But as the low makes its way there to north of the northwest corner of Alabama, this is midnight tomorrow night, showing sort of the coup de grace moving through as a band of showers and thunderstorms passes through our state, central Alabama. Now, let's use the European to sort of look at the winds here a little bit more. We looked at it closely from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, but here's kind of what will happen for Alabama in our area. We expect that strong gusty winds will push into western parts of the state. This is sort of how the precipitation will unfurl on the European, and you see those heavy rain amounts moving into Tennessee, and that is of a concern. These are the winds. These are sustained winds, showing that we'll start to see some fairly fresh winds across southwestern Alabama, averaging some 7 to 15 miles an hour. We'll start to gust to around 25 miles an hour over West Alabama as we get into the daytime hours on Monday. And by Monday night, it'll become a little bit windy. Winds 10 to 20 miles an hour. Western parts of the state, they'll increase as the center moves to the northeast. We'll see some gusts around 25 to 30 miles an hour, especially across western Alabama. And after midnight tomorrow night, I think that's when you'll see the strongest winds, some 20 to 30 miles an hour with occasional gusts to 40. So we'll kind of watch that as we go through time. And then those winds, kind of hang with us on Tuesday. It'll be a breezy day. This is 3 o'clock. 4 o'clock, you can see the winds beginning to slowly diminish as the center of the storm passes to the south of Nashville. These are storm total rainfalls from the European, showing those amounts in excess of 10 inch there, just generally south and west of New Orleans, with some 5 to 8 inch amounts there across much of Mississippi. You can see pretty much trending what we said, around 2 inches there, some higher amounts to near 4 inches over the western parts of Alabama, and some 1 to 2 inches amounts over eastern Alabama. Temperatures off the national blend of models. Today, a warm day. Tomorrow, a little cooler with a lot of clouds around. And then Monday, or Tuesday, much cooler. Well, not much cooler, but 80 for the daytime high with wind and rain around. Then, as the low moves out to the northwest, or to the northeast, it will pull in some slightly cooler air. Temperatures in the lower middle 80s for Wednesday and Thursday. We'll take that. Lows dropping into the middle, even flirting with the lower 60s toward the end of the week. Some drier air moves in here. And that's not all that's going on in the tropics. We've got Tropical Depression 10 expected to turn out to the northeast. 11 already moving off to its northeast. This system will become our next. If one of these doesn't become Julian, this one's got a really good chance to do it in the long term. But I think it probably turns out to see. And this area that the Hurricane Center has introduced this morning, associated with a weak and decaying frontal boundary, doesn't look like it's likely to develop. And of course, Ida is the main story. Well, I'll have frequent updates, lots of posts on the blog. Many thanks to the men and women of Alabama Power who took care of a power outage in our neighborhood. Off Acton Road, a tree fell late last evening and decimated a telephone or a power pole there. And those crews worked throughout the night to get the power back on around 2 a.m. I am thankful to them for that. I have a forecast update for you at noon, and just frequent reports from what's going on with Hurricane Ida and its impacts along the Gulf Coast and its impacts here in Alabama. But until I get to see you next Sunday, as I always tell you, keep an eye to the sky because you'll always have something fun to look at.